All right, so we're getting to time where we need to do the student presentations. And so I wanted to be able to demo all the aspects for this. And you want to get something submitted by tonight's deadline for assignment 6. The first requirement is your black vector type design. I just did it as a screen grab, but as long as you design this as a vector and then save it as an EPS, it's right there, then you can bring that EPS. Here, I'll demonstrate with the one I used at the start of class. I created this EPS, right, of Nico in this other form. So what you're going to do is bring it into your sketch. Here's my sketch. Turn off these elements. And then you format your sketch to be 16 by 20 inches by 350 pixels per inch. This is more than 16 by 20 inches because I added a border. So let me actually force that up to 17. Okay, now edit fill with white. I'm going to take that EPS that I saved along with an AI and an SVG of my black vector type, drag and drop it in. I got to move it above my sketch. And now I can free transform it, Command T, and because it's a vector and because it's a smart object, I can do any kind of transform placement of it for my poster that I like. Right? In fact, it's a vector like this, and if I wanted to, after I place it as a smart object, I can Command T, right-click it, I can skew it, I can drop it. And though this type design isn't really what I had in mind for this project, I can make it look pretty cool, like kind of athletic, like that. Like the Nike logo type in a way. So Nico, right? So now I have that EPS in there as a black vector type. I can save this as a JPEG and submit that. I could also include my spot illustration in there with it. And that would be requirement 1. As long as requirement 1 shows your black vector type solution. And all you need to do is just a screen grab. And why I like a screen grab, though I'll accept a JPEG too, it just takes up a lot more memory. Why I like doing a screen grab for these designs is this shows you what your outside edge's dimension is. So when you put it into Canvas, it's not just looking like it's floating, it's contained within that rectangle. Command Shift 4. All right, the next step, after you've saved that and you've posted it, the next step is to create a colored background. And you can do this in multiple ways. You want to move, obviously, the background behind your type and behind your spot illustration. And you can just do it as a fill. You can do it as a gradient. This is a gradient layered on top of a fill with a dissolve blending mode at a lower opacity, so you get that texture. And I composited in this kind of Art Deco design that I just found online. I also researched and found a bunch of modernist kind of poster borders. And I think I have those in this folder. Yeah, modernist poster borders. Like this one. The actual border is just that wide edge, but I could have internal borders that I composite in. Right. But the reason you need the background, so then I could rasterize that and I can play with its blending mode. Something like this. The reason you need the background color is for the next step, which is figuring out how to color your vector type. Oh, I like that too. So let's do a blending mode. Let's do that one. How do you make a new layer?
No, I've got the new layer. How do I fill it with color?
Do you want to fill it with a flat color or do you want to fill it with a gradient? So those tools are right here. The paint bucket, just like when we did flat color, that will fill your background with a flat color. The gradient tool, which is nested with the paint bucket tool, that will fill it with a gradient. And you can select your own gradient. I like to layer them up. Yeah, you get a lot of creative freedom here in your poster design. Okay, so now I have these things. Now I can start playing with how I color my black vector type. I start by making a duplicate of the black vector type. I mark the original as green because I don't want to mess with that, but I do want to mess with the duplicate. I double click, I get my layer styles, and I'm going to start with just a color fill, like a color overlay. And maybe I pick an orangish color, or a greenish color, or maybe a blue, but I want it to show up, right? Maybe the dark blue. That looks pretty good. But if I feel that's kind of boring, I can fill it with a gradient instead. And I can choose different gradients. The cloud gradients, these variations on white, right? Just very subtle. And then I can blend them together, just like I did with the background. So there's a reason I'm teaching you kind of these same approaches. So this has a blue color overlay at a low opacity on top of a light blue gradient. That way, it's a little bit more complex in a flat color. That color is a little bit darker than this color, and it's gradating between them. Then other things I can do. I can put on a nice stroke, just like we did with line art. I'll pick a different color, maybe a brown, and then I'll make it on the outside, and I'll make it normal mode, full opacity, right? And then maybe I want it to have an offset. So I might also add an outer glow. And this I'm going to make fully opaque and then spread it. Make its size nice and big. There we go. Right? Now all of that works, but it doesn't really have the feeling that I wanted for my poster. But that shows you how you can do color variations to it. So I'm going to turn that one off, turn that off, turn this off, and build with my intended design. And now I have to pick my colors, right? So this gradient is working really well, but it just makes the title a little too simple. So if I add the color overlay over the top, I could dissolve it in, right? Like make it barely there. But I don't think that really helps. So let me change this color. Maybe I use something a little bit warmer and not quite so dark. Like that sienna color. And then to really see it, I have to kind of zoom in to see how that texture would work. Right. And I realize, no, I really don't want that color overlay. I just want that gradient. So how do I get this to stand out? Well, I can use a stroke around it. That helps for sure. And I can decide whether it goes on the outside or whether it goes on the inside, right? Or whether it splits the middle and how thick it is. I like it on the outside, I think. Let's try it center. maybe centered. Let's see what that's doing to the edge. Yeah, so that gives it kind of a nice complexity where half of it's overlapping the fill, half of it's not. Right. Okay, now maybe a drop shadow. And I can soften that drop shadow by making it more spread out or making its size bigger. And I don't need that drop shadow to be black. Right. Maybe I want to give this a subtle color. And maybe this is where I bring in the purples or the dark blues again. Maybe you can steal right from your project. Get colors from that. So now, how do I post my color solution? Well, what I'm going to do is turn off the background. And that shows my color type solution. And maybe I like it, maybe I don't. If I don't like it, I need to keep working with it. So I'm going to play with bevel and emboss and texture. And I'm going to use the grass texture. No, the water texture. Right. And I'm going to make it a really small scale. So very subtle. So it looks like handmade paper, basically. What does this look like up close? When it's printed, looks like that. Almost like a plastered wall. And that just gives it a little bit of the variation I like so that when it's on this background that also has some texture to it, right? It stands out nice and sharp. So this is all just kind of my taste for poster design. So how do I turn it in? First I turn off my background and I save it this way. I can leave my spot illustration turned on or off. Right. Maybe I'll leave it turned off just because I did that for my black one. And then I'll do a screen grab where I show the edges. Cool. And I'll turn that in. And then the next one I turn in, I have the spot illustration turned on, placed where I want. I have the background with the border where I want, and I make sure that it's at least 16 by 20 by at least 300. But ideally it would be 17 by 21 by 350 because we can print 17 by 22 inches. And what you're seeing here is 16 by 20 inches, right? That white bleed is a ½ inch around each side because that goes to the edge of the paper. So how do I submit this? So I save this first as a PSD file, my assignment 6 PSD, and then I save a copy. So I'll update it, save it. Then I save a copy as a JPEG once it's done saving. And now I have all 3 requirements to turn in for assignment 6 by tonight's deadline. I'm not going to keep it at 12 quality because that is 65 megabytes. Instead, I want it to be around 5 megabytes. So I'm going to take its quality down pretty low. It's still going to look good that first time. This is just for the JPEG. Remember, my PSD is at full quality. When I print it, I'll make a TIFF, an archive file from my PSD. But this is just to post it to Canvas. So that's why I recommend the screen grabs so that you're not wasting a lot of your Canvas memory. Because if you save a JPEG that takes up 68 megabytes for all 3 of these, that takes up a lot of your Canvas memory. Okay, so requirement 2 for assignment 6 is a color variation of your type. And we do that with layer styles. And remember, we don't want to rasterize it. Just like our logo, we want to keep that type as a smart object.